Hello, welcome to the Wizard's Respite Sanctorum, the show that dives into all things TTRPG. Zach and I have a very special episode lined up today. It's something that we've done a little bit in the past, and we want to do more of. We are going to be discussing the making and designing and the creative process of TTRPGs with someone who makes designs and has created a TTRPG. Zach, are you ready to jump into this?
Yeah, I am. I'm always excited to talk to fellow creators. I'm always excited to talk to people about creating games, just in general. So this is really fun, and I'm very excited to meet a new TTRPG person, just in general. So
Yeah, part of the society. Um, well, let's go ahead and introduce them. Today, we have a guest. We are interviewing Paul Ehrlich of uh, phew.
clever Recluse games.
Yeah, thank you. I
It's
got
on the
so
screen, buddy.
I know it is right there. Clever Recluse Games. I'm sorry about that, Paul.
Oh, no
I have a
worries.
mush mouth, and I wanted to make sure I did not make a mistake on your last name. And I just everything dropped out after that. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm doing really well. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Weathering the weather at the moment. Excited about the topic today. Before I think we should just kind of jump into it.
Sure.
Paul,
Yes.
tell us about well, okay, Clever Recluse Games. You
Right.
know, that's your company, that's your publishing company. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on here.
Well, it's a company. It's actually technically been around since 2021, but we've just started launching products, and we just started. 2023 was our first one, and we did a 5e adventure, Dungeons and Dragons adventure, a Shadowed House, and you can actually get it on drive-through. You can get it at some stores in San Antonio. It's really fun. It's like 20 pages long. It is old school, which I personally like. I love old school RPGs. And I like that old school challenge, and it tries to bring that to 5e. And it can be unbelievably deadly if the characters have or the players have kind of gotten a little flabby. You know what I mean? A little out of practice with their mapping, a little out of practice with being careful, and sometimes that happens with 5e.
Sure. So, that's interesting. You're bringing this sort of old school gaming perspective to 5e, a very like new and kind of like the big it game at the moment. Um, what what would you say like your inspiration like for starting in on this journey way back in the days, starting in the hobby? Were you like an AD&D guy?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I was actually basic. I had the red box with the
Wow.
Elmore. I think it was the Elmore cover. Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And I played it when I was 11. I am more than 11 now. I'm much older than 11. So I've been playing for a really long time. It's so much fun to play RPGs. And I did fall out for a little bit, and I regret it now. Just looking back, I always have a good time.
You know, there's so many people, adults now that say the exact same
Yeah.
thing. It's hard to keep up with the hobby, when you get a little bit older. But these days, there's been such a resurgence. It's easier to find people to play with and to get back involved in the community and in the hobby and to make this like a part of your life again.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, so like,
Mhm.
man, Redbox, that's a long time. How much?
Oh, don't say that. Sorry.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like, like AD&D was my introduction.
Sure.
I think D&D is a lot of people's introductions, and way back then, like, things were pretty deadly. They were pretty like intense in times, and it
Hmm.
sounds like that sense of death and threat is something that you really enjoyed about the RPGs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I would say that it's kind of a signature of clever Recluse games that the games themselves are not pushovers. The adventures are not pushovers. You work for your memorable moments, but they're there.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I definitely appreciate that. You know, what you have to work for, you remember more, you know?
Yeah.
um so aside from, necessarily Redbox or AD&D or the legacy of D&D through the years, what other things have influenced you as a RPG writer? What do you
Oh,
bring into your games?
there's so much. I think I'm always taking things in, and I think you always have a vibration kind of going on, if that makes sense. Absolutely, other games that have inspired me, obviously Call of Cthulhu, which I think you kind of, if you want a challenging RPG, that's like the grandfather of
Sure.
really challenging RPGs. Um, Certainly for I Am Minotaur, some of the fiction that surrounded Dungeons and Dragons, that surrounded just basically fantasy in general. That was definitely an inspiration. Obviously, Greek mythology. Um, but yeah, even movies. There are times where I realized that I kind of took a spell and I didn't realize I was creating a spell of something that I saw in a film. And until somebody points out and says, "Hey, did you see this movie?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I did," but it wasn't a conscious thing. It kind of
Yeah.
just trickled in. So definitely, I just think as a designer and as a writer, you have to have your eyes and ears open at all times.
Yeah.
You're just receiving so much all the time.
I definitely see that. Like it's sort of like amalgamation of everything creative that kind of goes through you and then comes into sort of as little parts that are ingredients that help your own imagination be inspired and move forward.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned I Am Minotaur. I'd love
Mhm.
to jump into that a bit.
Sure. Absolutely.
Um,
That's our baby.
yeah. You got a Kickstarter going?
Yeah, we sure do. It is just for art and to try and raise money for hand drawn art. Just
Art's
because
a
the game,
killer.
yeah, it
It's
really
the
is.
killer. It's the killer. It's the absolute killer when it comes to creating an RPG.
Yeah, and we uh, we have other alternatives, and of course, some of them are controversial. But
Yeah.
we are trying to do 100% hand drawn art if this Kickstarter succeeds. If it does not succeed, we still will have the game. The game is complete. It is done. We are demoing it every week, and it runs like a champ.
Nice.
But we may have to go to other avenues for art. So that's really what's going on right now. But the game itself, everybody has a good time playing it, which is the most important thing.
Well, and it's respectable that you're trying to do the hand drawn art. It really is. It's hard though. I've personally had to use some AI art on some of my stuff, and it's never something you want to do, but it's one of those things like, okay, like one guy in a basement making a game, they're not going to buy the game if it doesn't have pictures, and I don't have any money. you know.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
artistic talent, I
Yeah,
don't have it.
exactly.
Yeah, I
So
can't. I can't. The answer on the internet is always, oh well, you can go out and draw yourself, learn some art lessons. Like I
right,
can barely write my name with my hand.
right,
It's not going to happen.
right,
if you want to see
right,
my Minotaur, I don't think so. You do
right,
not.
right.
um, yeah, I definitely empathize with you there. And everybody in the space knows, like you're not gonna get traction if it doesn't look good.
Yeah,
It's just
it's an
it just
unfortunate
is.
reality.
It is.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you just want to sell your mom and your dad and maybe your close
Yeah,
friends
yeah.
and do stick figures, and everybody will be fine. But unfortunately, if you want to have any traction whatsoever, you have to have a good looking product.
You really
Yeah.
do. You are preaching to the choir for
And
sure.
you got like I Am Minotaur is, as you might assume, about minotaurs. You know, like the visual aspect of that is definitely going to be something you want to impress upon people. Everybody, like, they're going to be donning this persona, like the minotaur creature. That's going to be a big deal. Let me ask you, why did you actually go with minotaurs? What was it that about, like, the minotaurs that you wanted to center a whole game around?
Well, it was funny the way this game kind of came about, and I'll just go back through the history quickly, hopefully. It started when I was like 17. I had D&D was moving to second edition, and I didn't want to buy the book, so I figured I would make my own game, which is something a 17-year-old would do.
Yep.
And and I made kind of this fantasy derivative of D&D, and it has progressed with me through the years. And I looked at it a few years ago, and I thought the system was cool, but I didn't want to make a D&D clone. It was too a derivative D&D. It just felt like everybody was doing it. It didn't really appeal to me. But one of the elements that I really liked was it featured minotaurs as player characters. And it was a very popular aspect of the game. So I said, well, what if all the characters were minotaurs? What if the game did not allow you to be any other race but a minotaur? And that interested me. And so I found myself, I found myself kind of just elaborating on that, and then all of a sudden I had this game. And I just figured, well, let's see if the playtesters like it, because I have some friends and people in the industry, and they were like, this is really good. It's different, which we like. It's a completely different feel, and it appealed to me enough that I could play it all the time without getting sick of it. And I think if you're a designer, that's something you got to keep in mind. Is you're going to be playing your game a lot.
You better like it.
Yeah, you better really like your game, because you're going to be playing it a whole lot. And I never get tired of playing the game. People who play the game really enjoy it. It definitely is not geared for the safe space people who tend to want just an RPG that gives them a safe space. And I don't mean that derisively. I just think
there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the game for those people.
Right.
Yeah. And I just really enjoy the game, and hopefully other folks do too. I've gotten good feedback so far.
It sounds like it was really organic. Like you came up with, like, this idea, you tinkered with it, and then you really put some energy into it, and it just seemed like it's sort of like you were inspired as you wrote into this minotaur sort of world.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely
awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Can I ask you something about the game, if I might jump in?
Absolutely.
Is this a game you can play solo, or is it? Can it be GM-less? No, it's a GM game.
It's a GM game. It is a GM game. It would be difficult to play solo. There's a lot of rules that go on behind the scenes that the players don't know about. And in that, in that respect, the players don't have the knowledge that they do in modern RPGs. Right. One thing I liked about the older RPGs is that players didn't know a whole lot about what was going on. The GM could surprise players, and in modern RPGs, I think that element has been lost. I remember
we've all been sitting at the table when Kyle goes to the book when the GM calls something, and I'm like, he's looking that rule up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Although I do love rules lawyers and I Minotaur, because it means that we're not playing Calvin ball. That there's a real rule book, and and sometimes I get caught out on things, and it's just like, as a GM, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's a real game. I just got caught out on a rule.
Yeah. And that also means that they're invested. They care. That rule matters to them at that moment, and they don't want to die. Which that lets you know they're immersed. They really want to see that comes out.
Yeah, it's great.
I did see, your mention about like a lot of things like the players not really knowing how certain things were happening and
Right.
keeping that sort of mystery in the moment. Does
Mhm.
that extend to the combat system?
Yes. Short answer is yes.
Oh,
The players do know. They rarely know what order everything is going to be in, and but where they declare their intention, say, "Yeah, I'm going to hit this guy" or whatever. But they don't know what order everything's going to happen in. They don't know when the bad guys are going to attack, or the opponents,
And they
and
don't know the initiative at all.
don't know initiative at all. Initiative is kept completely secret from the players. Um,
interesting.
yeah, it's fun. And as a matter of fact, if the players figure out the initiative system, the rule book specifically says here are some different initiative systems to throw them off.
I like that. I like that. I like
Yeah,
that. That's a
yeah,
good
Um,
one.
I'm guessing that prevents that over strategizing sort of aspect that some tables end up with,
Yeah.
where the players are spending so much time talking about what powers to use or what moves to use or what weapons to use, and not a lot of time just being in the moment.
right. Uh, Iron Minotaur is it is geared towards ambushes, just because combat is unbelievably deadly. So to mitigate any sort of risk, I encourage that as a matter of fact. But what I don't encourage is metagaming, where
Yeah.
I hate to call podcasts out, but Critical Role is amazing. But I remember seeing somebody arguing that, okay, this spell stacks on top of this spell, so I have to cast this spell first, and then this spell, and then
Yeah.
and that to me, that's not role playing. I mean, granted, they're brilliant at what they do, but that's not something I want to encourage. That kind of rules finessing, it doesn't really appeal to me. I mean, magic is magic. Who knows? Maybe the guy turns into a frog the next time you cast a spell. There's an element of chaos in magic. It's not like science.
Well, it stops you from thinking about the most important part of role playing, which is pretending to be somebody else. I think that is one of the biggest problems with D&D is they tend to do that where you're so into the stats and the levels and the experience. Sometimes you forget, oh, I'm this character that I'm supposed to be pretending to be, which is, to me, the most important part.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. I mean, there definitely are people who like the war game roots of D&D, and they like the minis and everything else. And I let them go and do it because that's what they like. But the game is really theater of the mind. And
I like that.
it's, uh, yeah, I would love it if you guys played sometime. It'd be a lot of fun.
I would love to play it. It sounds like definitely a me type of game.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Unbelievably deadly combat? Check.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a ton of fun, and yeah, I would love to jump into it, and definitely looking forward to just pouring through the manual once it comes out, because I mean, everything that I've read about that you have up about this really obviously shows there's a lot of heart and soul into it. You mentioned there for a second, like magic does, this and that. You're not 100% sure always what the bad guy's gonna do. And I noticed that on what you've written up about this magic system is that there's 100 unique spells available that you
Yeah, we have over 100 unique spells, and some of them are analogous to some of the spells in other RPGs, but some of them are really unique, and people do say, "Wow, that's a really cool spell." We definitely have heard positive reviews about our spells. It is a level-based system, magic points, and yeah. And people and characters know, or rather the players know, how fast things get cast, but again, they're not entirely sure. So that's another fun part.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun, and it sounds like a fun, mechanical battle system, keeping everybody on the edge. So let's dive into a little bit of like the creative process about this, because 100 unique spells is a lot.
That is a lot. I have
A
the
new
hardest time
initiative
with Magic.
system that you can, yeah, like, how do you go about like starting that? But for the creative process, how did you like sit down like, okay, I'm making some spells today?
You know, it flows organically. The game itself, the spellcasting careers all have very different perspectives and very different spheres of influence. A lot of them are priests. And so if you get like a necromantic priest, obviously that's going to have a very different sort of spellcasting than a life priest or something like that. It wasn't easy. There were times where I would get a spreadsheet out and be like, oh, I need 5 level 2 spells for the necromantic priest, and it's just like, oh, level 2, that's not so great. I can't do anything super powerful, but I can't do anything really crappy either. And just think about things and say, okay, what is a cool spell that's kind of flashy but doesn't do a whole lot? And then just kind of stare at the screen until something comes to mind. Excuse me, but it's not that. Spells are really difficult. They're probably one of the most difficult parts of the game. And I have read a lot of design texts that are like, "Oh, spells are just fluff. They're just flavor," and it's like, no, they're pretty tough, and they kind of make or break your game. If you cast a really cool magic spell, people will remember. You know, it's like, okay, I cast this spell, and you know what? This really cool thing happened. But if it's generic, you're going to lose a lot of your core audience, at least some of your core audience.
Sure. Yeah, it's gonna you're gonna lose them to the, well, this is just XYZ sort of RPG and not, I am Minotaur. And it sounds like, a lot of this process is sort of a combination of, inspiration and just hard work and grit.
Pretty much. A lot of it's just me sitting there staring at the screen until my forehead bleeds, or walking aimlessly around until I finally get an idea and I sit down. But yeah.
Okay. That's really cool. And like, you sort of like, it sounds like it's very unique to this world. At least some of these spells are very unique to this world. Some of them, I'm sure, just have to get like a certain job done because there's certain spells that have to be in a magic system, kind of, like everybody's going to expect some kind of fire spell, right? Or whatnot.
Yes. And if I can interject there, I tried to just have the unique spells, and people were like, where's my fire spell? Where's my this spell? So I had to put them back in.
Everybody thinks of, magic casting, and they're going to have an idea, and a lot of people have like that blending of those ideas, like that comes from D&D, that comes from movies, it comes from books. You're gonna it's just the way it is. Yeah. Magic fire.
I want to shoot stuff from my hands. Like you can't think, you can't have any more imagination than shoot stuff from your hand. Okay, you can shoot stuff from your hands, I guess.
You can do it. Yeah, exactly.
You gotta have it in there.
Yep, it's in there. That was a note. Yeah, totally. And so I put it in. Absolutely. But where's the spell where I shoot stuff from my hands? It's like, okay, it's in there.
This is a cool game, but how do I shoot stuff from my hands?
So okay. Magic systems, that definitely sounds like you put a lot of work into it, and you definitely listened to your players, your playtesters as you developed it. I'm kind of curious, the Minotaur is such an important aspect of this game, clearly. When you come up with like, even the combat system, the way that players fight, or the weapons they have, or the magic they have, does it go to like Greek mythology? Does it go to other sources where Minotaurs have been used? Like how do you mix that in?
At first what I did was I took careers from the classes. It's a class-based system. And I took classes from the old game that I thought were Minotaur appropriate. and use those. But then I started thinking about the society I wanted Minotaurs to have, because Minotaurs actually do have a society in this game. They have an empire and it's falling and all this other stuff. And
Minotaur cities, right?
yes,
I want, after he answers this question, I definitely want to ask about the base overall story of this game. Because when I first looked at it, and unfortunately I was not responsible as the co-host / producer of the show and did not do enough research just because I had too much stuff going on, but I got to look at the cover. I went to your Kickstart. I read that, just the very first overview. And the first thing I thought was Minotaurs and labyrinths, and what you're describing is something very different. And I want to hear I want to hear the overview, because this sounds awesome.
Let me see. I'm sorry. What was the previous question? What question was I answering? I'm old.
I'm sorry. Welcome to the digression of the Sanctorum.
Yeah. I'm just old.
We've asked you 6 questions. You can pick one.
We're talking about classes, right? And that's really the whole thing. And I really wanted to build a Minotaur pantheon of gods that was different enough from the Greek gods that the GM didn't have to feel beholden to Greek mythology if they didn't want to be. But it had to be similar enough that if the GM wanted to take aspects of Greek mythology and incorporate it, they could. And so we have some analogous gods to the Greek pantheon, but they are different. So you can get away with changing things up.
Interesting. That's really interesting. And let's dive into the
I want to hear about the story. I'm hooked. I'm hooked. The fish hook is in.
Empire rise. How these gods form the Minotaurs. I saw on the page that there are other races in the world, though the game is about the Minotaurs.
Correct.
What is this world?
Well, it's an entirely new world. It absolutely has aspects from, again, Greek mythology and other mythos, but it's completely new, which is also fun, because people who are jaded with RPGs say we just put them in this brand new world. And there are a bunch of different new monsters that they've never dealt with before. Let me see. How can I start? Well, yes.
I've never had to do an elevator pitch.
Trying to condense it down, just because it's this whole world and this whole lore. But what I will say is, there are no limitations on the Minotaur as a race, and that's something that people have to kind of wrap their heads around, because you think about it like being a labyrinth, or you think about it being, Minotaurs being stupid, right? Everybody thinks the Minotaurs are dumb. Not in this game. In this game, they can be very intelligent. There was an entire empire. It was decaying, but 50 years prior to the character's creation, there was an out-and-out war. And the Minotaurs were they were on the winning side, but they lost a lot of land. They lost a lot of territory. A lot of the Minotaurs' land that they currently is in their empire has been just rendered completely useless by magical, almost like fallout and stuff like that. So they're finding their way in this incredibly changed world.
It's like fantasy post-apocalyptic almost.
Well, it's still Greco-Roman, but there are deserts that are encroaching on their cities, and perpetual storms across some of the landscape that are blasting things with lightning and stuff like that.
I don't. I think I've mentioned this maybe a couple of times on the show. I go by Ash professionally, and everybody out there in the world knows that, because my legal first name given to me by my father is a mouthful and has been a nickname since forever. But my family knows me by Achilles.
Yeah.
My dad loves Greek mythology.
Oh, wow.
These have been my bedtime stories since I was the PG version, because these are Greek mythology is not PG.
No.
But
No.
what you're describing here is about this world that is like, has these deserts encroaching and these storms and all of this. Like, sounds like a very chaotic world. And depending on your era of Greek mythology, a lot of the world that you get is mysterious and scary as the adventurers go through it, and these very intense, overwhelming sort of ways. It kind of sounds like you're describing a bit.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And the game, I think the game really does. And I may be giving myself too much credit, but I think the game really does capture a lot of the feeling of Greek mythology, because it can be very silly, but it can also be very deadly. Which, you have Zeus chasing human women around and all this other stuff going on, all this kind of silliness going on. But yeah, when the gloves come off, you have Perseus fighting Medusa and stuff like that. It has that same incongruity to it.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like the outlandish, the over the top, but also like the magical, the whimsical, and then the intense and the scary. That all fits into Greek mythology really well, and it very much sounds like that fits into the world that you've crafted here. And I've noticed like one of the things I can't remember exactly where I found it on one of the pages that you listed. Some of the weapons, I think you mentioned one by name. It was I looked it up. I think it was a Greek sword.
Correct. Yeah, we use we don't use the word sword or anything, or a scimitar or anything like that. It's a spatha. And that was actually a Greek sword, and a Xyphos, which is a short sword. And actually, some of the deity names are kind of bastardized Greek words. Berkamos, which I believe means anger. It's close to anger in Greek. So, and he's the god of battle fury. So we do try and actually incorporate some real Greco-Roman stuff into our game.
That's makes sense in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people still like resonate minotaurs with the Greek mythology. I've seen them depicted in fiction in a lot of different ways. There's of course the dumb minotaur. There's the hot-headed minotaur is one that I actually just finished a novel that had a hot-headed minotaur in it.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of stuff that really explores like a diverse culture of minotaur though, which I think is really cool. I love anytime somebody takes something that's like very traditionally one thing and is like, yeah, but they can also be all of these other things. I really enjoy that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, well, the interesting dichotomy here is Minotaurs have this really rigid society that is based around honor duels in this game. You can be walking down the street and a Minotaur can challenge you to an honor duel, and you kind of either you have to deal with it one way or another. But Minotaurs still have the notorious hot-headedness. I did put that into the game. And there are times where Minotaurs will attack each other. The party will attack each other. Stuff like that. That is definitely a part of the game. And
that's cool.
It leans really well into the bull like anger aspect.
I mean, there's still minotaurs, right? I did want to ask. You had said that there's other races, like sentient races, in your world. Are you planning on in the future, if this is successful, doing like a game about other races in this world, kind of linking them together, or?
It's possible. I kind of, obviously we want to get through this one first.
Right. Sorry.
But yeah, I mean,
not trying to commit you to anything.
It's a cool question. I do get asked that, and let's just say I have ideas. But that's pretty much all I can say at this juncture.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, we definitely want to see the launch finish up before we before you get swamped and lost in writing again, because that's kind of how it goes, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I disappear. My friends don't see me for weeks, if not a month or two. They got to get used to it. Sorry.
Yeah, and then you're back, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're gonna play a new game. Yeah. So okay.
Yeah, I know I'm halfway through writing this game that you guys all like, but how about we do this one? Because this is what my crazy brain decided to make me not sleep about today. So.
Yep. So let me ask you. Are there any other anything that maybe didn't quite make it on your page or on the Kickstarter about the Minotaur people and their world that is cultural, that like, and then like makes up who they are?
We don't want to make him give away all his secrets.
I know.
You know, the Kickstarter or the page. One thing I highly recommend if you're interested, and I do have to put a little bit of a plug in, is the YouTube videos. We have a couple that are up. I'm pretty proud of them. I don't know if you got a chance to see them. One is the Priest of Berkamos, which is one of the most common careers for a Minotaur to have. And I narrated it in my monster truck voice, so it's really hilarious.
I'll have to check that out. That sounds fun.
Yeah, it's a blast. And then there's the Priest of Philios, which is the necromantic priest, and that's something a little different. You know, there's a lot to the game, and there's like there's at least 11 careers, and they all have a different outlook. There's a lot of surprises.
That sounds like it.
Yeah, if you
I keep wanting to ask him about the system, but he specifically said that part of it is not letting everybody know about the system, so I have to keep fighting it back every time.
Well, I can tell you a couple of things. The first thing here is I can say that you automatically hit, which is how scary the game gets. And there's no roll to hit. It's a percentile system, but you usually automatically hit if you attack something. It's assumed that you're competent enough that if you try and whack something with an object, you're going to hit it.
Really? I like that. I actually like that. It leaves a lot of potential too, because then you could like, how well do you hit? That could maybe be the damage, and like it could be a lot about stealth and sneaking up on somebody instead of just that's a really good idea. I've never heard of a system where you always hit. That's right there. That kind of excites me. I love systems. I'm all about the system play. Probably too much, but like just that is kind of like, oh, that's something I've never heard of before.
Yeah, and it's all percentile based. That's one thing, or it's not all percentile based, but it's mostly percentile based, which is an adjustment if you're used to like D20.
I like percentile.
I love percentile. Yeah, totally love it.
No, you're speaking my language. I felt a little outnumbered by D&D people at first. So I'd stay quiet.
Yeah. Shout out to the percentile Palladium. So it's you automatically hit. Mm-hmm. I'm visualizing this just like getting an idea of like the sense of combat, then like big giant minotaurs beating the crap out of each other.
Yeah, dude, that's it. And there's a critical hit system too, by the way. We have hit points, but there's a pretty nasty critical hit system too.
That is a pro wrestling trading chops combat system. I am all for that. That is just Gunther and the Big Show slapping each other. I love it. That sounds amazing to me.
Yeah,
big meaty minotaurs slapping man meat. I love it.
Yeah. The biggest guy survives the round kind of thing. Like, it sounds brutal, and I can't even imagine. Like you said, it was a brutal system. I can't even imagine just the idea of your character walking out of there. That makes me excited because like you're like, holy crap, we survived that, guys. You know, kind of moment.
Yeah.
So
Well,
how
it also takes the. I'm sorry, I just want to add one more thing because that's really fun for me. It
Yeah, me
also
too,
takes
actually.
out we've talked about it a lot on this podcast before, which is you're trying to give your players that power fantasy to an extent. I mean, they are there. Like, safe spade or not, they're there for an escape. They don't want to be, Joe Schmo who's a bus driver. They want to be, in this case, a powerful Minotaur that kicks ass. I love the idea of eliminating that. I'm gonna hit him, and then you roll a 5 on a d20, and it's like, never mind. Drop my sword again, or those like low roll chains where you'll just miss for like 4 attacks in a row, and it's like, why am I here? I love that just eliminates that. You're always going to be like, I'm hitting him. That is happening. And you can just see that in your head, and that immediately gives you that dopamine rush. I love that.
And let me say that we have run the exact same encounters in 5e and in I Minotaur. The 5e encounter will take 2 hours with the same number of people. The Iron Minotaur, it's a half hour. So it is fast. And so,
awesome.
yeah, you don't sit around. You're not going to sit around and just be like, okay. We get people, we're doing demos, we get people who have played a lot of other RPGs and they expect to be able to take their phones out and mess around between. And I'm usually looking at them like, okay, what? Oh, it's my turn already? It's like, yeah, it's your turn. We need to know what you're going to do.
Well, and bravo on that, because that's a hard thing to master. Because like combat is always like and even when you write something and you're like, this is going to be fast, and then you sit down at the table, you're like, God, it's still taking 30 freaking minutes. Why does it take 30 freaking minutes for the sword fight? It's a hard thing to do. So that's
one
amazing.
guy to do one thing.
Yeah, for one guy to do one thing.
There looking up on their phone trying to calculate, well, what do I do?
Yeah.
Am I going to do this? Am I going to do this? You're going to die?
Yeah. I like that. I like that it's fast. I love fast systems. I love fast, severe systems. Those are my favorite systems in the world.
I think this is your system then.
I was about to say, it sounded like a definite my system right there. All right, Wiz, I was stepping on you. You go ahead and ask another question. I get that really excited me.
No, I know. And I'm like, honestly, like, it's so hard for me to not ask 1,000 questions from that point. Like, I want to know how healing works, how recovery works, how, but, we got to get the game. That's the point of
some of it's got to be behind the curtain. Yeah.
So why don't we pivot real quick and move into maybe design philosophy, your approach to, when you sat down, you started making these mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
What you've talked a little bit about it, about your influences, and you've talked, like staring at the computer and making it happen. But is there anything that you could, like, if you were to whittle it down as to, like, okay, this is how I'm going to do this game. This is my philosophy about writing games. Is there anything that would jump out at you?
First of all, I've seen, I've been to some design groups. I'm honestly not a fan of design groups. I've seen games that this is a tough question. I've seen games that are in some ways over designed. I'm just gonna boil it down. And I like theme parks and I like roller coasters. I feel that a lot of people try and design the best steel roller coaster in the world. And they try and put a bunch of loops on it, and they try and make it as smooth as possible, and it does everything, and it has like the biggest drop ever. I'm the guy who likes the wooden roller coaster in the back of the park that feels like it's going to fall apart every time I ride it. The rules work. Are they the most elegant rules? Probably not. Are they the most sophisticated rules? Definitely not. But every game I make, and there are others that hopefully will be coming out, knock on wood. I can't really talk about those now. They always give me a good time. I want people to be happy. that's really my goal. When I sit down to make a game, I say, is this a game that people will enjoy playing? Is this a game that will make people happy? And then I just try and kind of distill it down to its lowest form, and then maybe build up from there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, that was a pretty hard question I threw at you.
Quite elegant response, I would say.
Game designing. It was a really elegant response. And
I don't even like roller coasters, and I understood the analogy.
Yeah, and like honestly, those are the kind of like the only roller coasters I ever went on as a kid. I grew up in California. We went to Knott's Berry Farm, which is a very, very, very old roller coaster place. But I get it. When you're walking into this game, like you never know what's gonna. If you never know what's gonna happen, which is like one of the principal design feels, it's always gonna feel like you're on edge. And that analogy of like not necessarily having everything, like you said, as prim and polished and D&D Beyond-esque and ready to go on your phone, but rather having it in the moment. I can. That's a really interesting approach to designing the game for almost the feel of the moment, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, and I think as a GM, that's something we always have to keep in mind. There are times, I think, just when I've played any system or GM'd any system, where stuff just had to flow. Where you just had to, the game had to flow at a certain point, and if the rules were a little kludgy, you kind of had to streamline.
Right.
And with me, the one I think of immediately, non-IM in his heart, is the Call of Cthulhu Chase rules for like I think it's 5e are pretty kludgy. They, if you try and play them as written, it becomes really awkward really fast. But if you drop a certain couple of aspects of the rule, it tends to go a lot more quickly, and it's still fair, and it's still, you're not screwing your players over, which is always the most important thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, you're trying to simulate life. So it's not going to be simple or easy. It's not going to be something that can be summed up. You know what I mean? I like the idea of like, these are the rules. They're not always going to look great. It's going to make the most fun experience for what you're trying to do in this situation, because when you get into those really heavy, like 2,000-page systems that are like, this is what happens if a train is moving this fast and you fall off, or like D&D with the rules for being submersed in lava. If you're submersed in lava, you're dead. That's it. We don't need to roll dice. You're fully submersed in lava. The lava wins. It's over. I think that there is something kind of beautiful about that this is the best thing for what you're trying to do in the moment,
Exactly, and that was kind of going to my roller coaster analogy. That the 2,000-page systems are what I think of when I think of like the loop-de-loops that it's 10,000, it's a 10,000-foot drop or whatever.
Yep.
But they still make wooden roller coasters, and the wooden roller coaster still feels like it's going to fall apart at any moment. And that's what I want the players to feel. The GM, I want to make sure that they realize, okay, there's a track. You're going to be okay.
Give them a little bit of guidelines and make sure that they're not going to panic too much.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to leave them out to dry. You want some decent rules for them. But the players, man, the players should feel like at any moment everything's going to collapse on them. That's totally how I feel.
Well, okay. One more question on game mechanics, because you kind of inspired me there on that. So, I mean, it's very clear that you put a lot of like energy in this game since you were 17. You tinkered with it in the back of your head, then you really dove into it, and I think it sounded like you were really playtesting a lot.
Mm-hmm.
When you started doing this and you started playtesting and you started working through these systems, is there any rule that you were like, okay, you know what? I got to get rid of this? It's not in the system anymore. You were like, you know what? I love this rule, but it's just not working. Like I figured it out.
Yeah, there were trying to think of one that I could use as an example. I mean, there's been so much of that. You have to, as a writer, as anything, you kind of have to kill your darlings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But I mean, really, objectively, I mean, I Minotaur did that. The entire game, because it was originally a fantasy game that had a bunch of different races you could play and a bunch of different, but it was so generic and so lifeless that when I sat down and I looked at this thing and I said, okay, why, if I've been playing D&D for, I've been playing 4E and 5E, why would I play this game? I couldn't come up with an answer. If it was just a generic fantasy game, if it was the old game. So there's plenty there that I loved. There was an entire spell system that got axed. There's probably another 100 spells that have gotten knocked out. So, yeah.
Your advice to designers would definitely be ready to suck it up and take the hatchet at some point.
Yeah, grab a drink. I like bourbon and just get ready. It's brutal. Yeah, I never suggest you throw anything away, but definitely put it aside. You got to do it.
So we like I said, like you went through a lot of playtesters to get this going. You listened to them, and now you have a game, you have a Kickstarter. How's the community, like your playtesters, everybody? How's engagement like starting to grow with this Kickstarter you got going on?
Well, I'm gonna be frank. The Kickstarter's been a challenge because it is so far afield. I think that's part of the issue is, people are like, Minotaurs. Why would I want to play Minotaurs? I locally, and when I go and people play it, like at a convention or something like that, I always get a positive response, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. You got to get. I mean, if people are loving it, that's the success. The other stuff would be getting it in front of them, but the success is the success of the. Is it fun? Is the game doing what's supposed to be doing? Is it fun?
That's usually the question I ask afterwards. Did you guys have a good time? That's like the first question I ask. Because if they're not having fun, why am I doing this? Why even be here? I could be an accountant and be making a ton of money or whatever. But that's what we're here for. Life is hard, man. Life is hard. And we're here, and hopefully we're making people's lives a little bit better. That's kind of what we have to. That's our task.
Bring a little bit of escape, happiness, and a little bit of chaos.
Sure.
Spice that brings it in.
Sometimes a lot of chaos, but sure.
All the chaos, if it's my game. All the chaos.
Okay, well, I mean, this has been like a really fun conversation. It's been great to dive into a lot of this stuff. Honestly, like, I feel like I could like chat with you about the deep dive of a lot of these mechanics and a lot of your ideas for like ever.
I want to do a demo in the
shop
future.
Is a lot of fun.
No joke. I want to do a demo in the future.
That is not a problem. We can definitely talk about that.
We'll find some way. The schedules are very tight over here at the Wizards Respite / Old Man Gaming channels, but really want to do a demo after talking to you.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, I'm really stoked about it. I'm really excited. But before we go finish up with the night, do you have any future projects, or what's on the horizon? What's next up after this Kickstarter for
Well, we there's always there. This is a company. Basically, I'm the only employee right now, but this is a company, and one reason this is a company is because there's always going to be something else in the pipeline. Nothing that would take away from I Am Minotaur. We might be going in a different sort of direction, but we're going to support I Am Minotaur. It might not even be an RPG. We might have some card games coming up or something like that.
Oh.
So, but there's always something going on.
That's awesome. And we are going to be very much looking forward to seeing whatever comes next. And the next thing is, getting our hands on this book and diving into it, and that very much looking forward to it.
Well, thank you guys for having me on. I certainly appreciate it. It's great meeting you both, and the fact that you're pretty close to me, Wiz, that's very cool.
Yeah, that was awesome. I was really stoked to see another, a member of the community, and it seems like you're real active down there in San Antonio. I might have to swing by.
That's great. I'll just be up here in Ohio freezing my ass off. You guys have fun with I Am Minotaur.
We'll stream you when we get there, man. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we gotta figure something out.
So okay. Where can everybody out there listening to this get your game, get your more about what you're doing? Where let us know where the plugs are. Where do they go?
Well, let's see. The first place you can always go is to my website. It's at www.cleverreclusegames.com, and that is 2 R's, Clever Recluse. And we do have the Kickstarter. You should be able to find it. The Kickstarter is incredibly long, the name is, but you should be able to, in the search, use I Am Minotaur, and it should pop up. And that's going to be going on until April 9th. And I highly recommend our YouTube, Clever Recluse Games. And we have a lot of fun. We had a complete total walkthrough of I Am Minotaur. We had a 4-hour stream with a bunch of folks from San Antonio. And we also have those cool videos I was talking about earlier. So that's a lot of fun.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and all the links for all of that will be below. They'll also be on the wizardsrespite.com.
Yeah, they'll be in the description on the YouTube for sure. I mean, if you're watching this on Wizards Respite, you'll be able to see it. If you're watching it on my YouTube channel, it'll be in the description. If you are watching this on Spotify, go to wizardsrespite.com, and that's where you'll get the links, because Spotify gets weird about links. But just...
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure everybody listening has an opportunity to jump in and dive deep into this. Paul, thank you very much for jumping in here and talking about your game and chatting with us about all this stuff. We love the nuts and bolts. We love talking shop, and this has been really a blast.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
It was great. Thank you so much. I had a great time.
All right, thank you. Well, everybody out there, thanks for checking this out. Thanks for listening. Thanks for moving forward with this. We're really wanting to do more interviews just like this, so stay tuned. We're going to be talking with more creators, designers of these games, of everybody's favorite hobby. And for everybody out there listening, thank you, and have a great evening, and keep rolling them dice.